So tell us, what's the big dream?
The big dream is to make nature an investable asset class like real estate, like private equity, like infrastructure. Because if we can do that, we can literally channel billions, if not trillions of asset owners' money, pension funds into nature. And in my mind, that is the only way that we can credibly reverse global biodiversity loss. But nature, the cool thing about nature, it's like 4 billion year old technology that is extremely well designed to protect us against the challenge of climate adaptation. I can talk very specifically about what that means here in the UK, where I'm based, but really climate change manifests itself with this kind of twin crisis of biodiversity loss, really through water. So flooding, too much water flooding, too little drought, and then water quality issues. And our core belief is that engineered solutions, cement, steel is not the answer. And hopefully I prove to you how oyster reefs, sphagnum moss, and beavers can A, protect us, but B, we can make money out of investing in them.
So what's the end goal then that you have in mind?
We want to prove that nature is an investable asset class. And in 10 years from now, we want to have raised and deployed £10 billion. And hopefully then crowded in big players like BlackRock and Schroders to also go, yes, natural capital investing in nature is as investable as real estate, as infrastructure. Now, we think if we get to that stage, actually, we can export that model, because I think how we get money to earn a rate of return is quite innovative. The real goal is that we've credibly made a dent in this huge global biodiversity loss challenge that we face, that we're using nature to provide resilience to people's lives, to people's homes, to the businesses, and to our assets, resilient communities, and effectively have a nature-based economy which is working with, not against, capitalism or economic growth. Pension funds understand the concept of planetary boundaries, the double nexus of climate change and nature loss, and see that as systemic risk to their equity portfolio, to their bond portfolio, to their real estate portfolio, and to their members. And there's been some brilliant work by the Institute of Actuaries here in the UK saying that 25% of our GDP is at risk in the next 25 years. Norges, which is the second biggest asset owner on the planet, reckons their US equity portfolio could lose up to 19%. And the point is that you can't diversify away from these risks. So how can we step down and invest in nature as an asset class? I have a very simple model for what makes something an asset class. It has to have one of 3 characteristics: utility, scarcity, and cash flow. So pretty much all asset classes have an element of this. So let's take nature. I'll pick 2 sort of examples of natural capital in the UK. One is sphagnum moss. It's what you get when you have healthy peatland and at the top. And the other is oyster reefs. So sphagnum moss can store 20 times its volume in water. It cleans the water, so it slows down the flow of water, stores it, which reduces drought in the summer, flooding in winter. It cleans the water, which means water utilities don't need to build as many water treatment plants. It increases the biodiversity, insects and birds, which has lots of other sort of positive systemic risks. It reduces wildfire risk because the area is always damp, and that's a huge problem in the UK and around the world. And also it sequesters a load of carbon. Utility, massive. What no one has done is gone, but who should pay for that? So in the UK, BT, Vodafone, they build masts, they charge me for 4G, they charge me for Wi-Fi. The big idea that we have is how can we get a water utility in the UK to pay us an offtake agreement for clean water? How do we get the local fire brigade to pay us an offtake agreement because we're reducing their costs? How do we get the local council to pay us because the pressure on the NHS from wildfires and respiratory disease is lower? So that's one example. That's sphagnum. At the other end, oyster reefs. Oysters are incredible. There's actually a really cool project that someone's trying to do in Hong Kong. There's obviously the one off New York. But oysters do 3 things really well. They clean water. One oyster can clean 200 liters of water a day. So the second thing they do is they are like a coral reef in the kind of zones that we live in, so like the North Sea. So it's where basically fish go to lay their eggs. It's the nursery for fish. So critical for marine biodiversity, which is critical for anyone who has a business that's attached to fish. The third thing is they are excellent at coastal erosion mitigation. So they really dampen wave energy and are much more effective than what we traditionally do is build walls to protect homes and railways and roads. So again, the same idea is how do we get paid for that? And in my world, UK pension funds and asset owners, but by the way, they're no different from Canadian or US or Singapore. Step one, we'll do an oyster reef. We'll restore it. We've already funded what is Europe's largest oyster reef restoration. It will be 4 million oysters. The off-taker is a very large, well-known pet food manufacturer, and they will pay for it. So most oyster reef restoration at the moment is done philanthropically. This will be the first oyster reef that is funded through a commercial financial model.
Why is the off-taker interested?
So pet food business is hugely profitable, is growing at a 6% CAGR, but UK and European cat food is basically made from fish from Area 27 of the North Sea. So I think everyone on Planet Mavericks will be familiar with this idea of TNFD, Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure. If you do a TNFD analysis on Mars or Nestle, you realize that they make more money from pet food than chocolate or coffee. That business is going to double in the next decade, but their entire UK and European revenue lines, billions of dollars, billions of EBITDA, is entirely dependent on the stock of fish in the North Sea. And that ball of fish is just shrinking. And so what the coral reef will do is, look, this 4 million oyster reef doesn't solve that problem, but is a stepping stone in a journey that we think companies like these will be embarking on over the next 10 years. And we're already for 2026 working on a £100 million oyster reef where we've got a single off-taker to fund 100 million oysters. What's new is this idea that I fund the restoration of nature and I get a corporate off-taker to pay for those ecosystem services. That's what's unique about our model. But the really cool thing is that we're a fund manager, right? So stepping back, we are 25% owned by West Yorkshire Pension Fund, which is a UK government pension fund. So that's a model in Australia. IFM is owned by the Australian supers. It's rare in the UK, but it's really cool to be owned by an asset owner. So they own a 25% stake in us. They seeded us last September. But they also seeded our fund with £25 million. We launched in June and we're deploying that capital. So that oyster reef will be our first deal. And we're going to use that seed portfolio to raise £150 million. So when I said that we want to get to 10 billion, our model is do 25 million, prove our idea, raise 150 million, and then in 2 to 3 years time, come back and raise £1 billion. And then once we raise £1 billion, we're pretty confident that over the next 5-7 years, we'll grow that to 10 billion because we will have completely shifted people's mindset that how is it that I can make money out of restoring nature? Up until now, it's been seen as either something that NGOs do or something that government does. And the crazy thing is that this oyster reef, we will have done more for coastal water restoration in the UK than the British government has done since World War II.
Give me a basic understanding, like research papers, policy, advocacy for someone to say, you know what, yes, there's a direct link here. I have the world's top 100 scientists now saying this. So what is it?
So one of that is that my relationships and network in the UK go deep. And I have built a brilliant team. It's having a big vision and it's about pulling together the team. And again, I know you've worked in the carbon markets and I know you get this because you've worked with mangroves. But what we realized is carbon is quite intangible, but flood risk, drought risk, we are hyper local. Whereas a lot of the solutions was global, it's carbon, it's a global problem, it's global action. What we're doing is we're like laser focused and we might just be on the coast of Norfolk and we're like, what if we restored this bit of nature and who does that impact? Or we might be in this little section of Manchester and go, hey, if we restored this many hectares of peatland and put in place sphagnum moss, we can save money and therefore make money. That's been the product market fit pivot that we've taken to getting paid for nature. So we're targeting so we have a 4 returns framework: financial, natural, social, and inspirational. Our financial target, net of fees to investors, we're targeting 10%. What I would say is that our performance is correlated with physical climate risk. So unfortunately, as physical climate risk increases, our returns should go up. But obviously, for a portfolio diversification thing, that's good. The second thing is we've assumed a very low price of carbon and biodiversity net gain. So the mistake I think a lot of funds made is they said, oh, carbon credits are going to go to $200. We're going to make you 15 to 20% IRR. If carbon prices do go up that, we've got a nice little kicker. So the IRR should be higher. But what we want to be really confident, what we're trying to manage expectations is if we can deliver you 8 to 12%, more like infrastructure, but what we give you is all of these other impact measurements.
Sure.
Natural return, where we can say how many oysters have we restored, how many hectares of peatland, how many rivers have we remeandered, how much carbon have we sequestered,
Right.
how much biodiversity have we increased. The third is the social thing. We're going to be getting more jobs for crab fishermen. We're going to be creating green jobs. We're going to be improving people's health and well-being. We're going to be improving local food, nutrient density. So there's a whole load of social KPIs, which again is extremely attractive for UK pension funds investing in the UK. And then fourth is this kind of inspirational one, which is we need to fix this problem fast, right? And we have 25 years to turn it around. So I hope this inspires other people. I hope this inspires other Rebalance Earthers in Singapore, in South Africa, in Canada, in Bolivia, because we just don't have time. So that's our fourth rate of return, which is the inspirational rate of return. So the purpose of the 25 million is to go to market and raise 150 million with deal flow. In the UK, we've got a couple of endowments and foundations and high net worth individuals who are looking to invest. So success is we close that fund at the end of the year, and we will at that point be the largest climate adaptation fund, because effectively we're using nature for climate adaptation ever raised in the history of the world, which again is sad because most of it is climate mitigation, it's around carbon and it's around net zero, which we need to do as well. But there has been so little done around sort of climate adaptation. And then once we've done that, 2026 is then about deploying that capital. Can we try and deploy that 150 million over the next 3 years? It's a 15-year term, so it's a deeply illiquid asset. And then at that point, we think we can go back to the market and raise $1 billion. The fund will probably be open into Q1, so that's probably the window. I'm guessing probably the minimum ticket size is £1 million. What I want to stress is the fund only invests in the British Isles, but we think at least 20% of our fund will be deployed under the sea, in oyster reefs, in kelp, in seagrass. The UK has an amazing ratio of coastland to landmass. You'll know this from your mangrove. The cool thing about stuff under the sea is kelp grows so much faster than trees. So if you want to sequester carbon at scale in the UK, it's really address peatland and it's kelp. As well as there's a whole lot of biodiversity benefits. There's a whole load of kind of what's called marine net gain. There's a whole load of coastal resilience that can be used.
I think the beautiful thing I also see is that the optionality that you will have after doing this is something that you're not even accounting for, because you have carbon, you have other things you will get into because you're just starting out.
Correct. The fund owns all the ecosystem services of nature.
Yeah.
We will only monetize some of them at the beginning, but we will be able to monetize more in the future. Because I come from a pensions world, which is much more conservative, I think it's always better to under-promise and over-deliver, rather than, I think what happened a few years ago is a lot of people promised IRRs that were too hard to deliver. They might be right in the long term, but I think getting it right in the next 3 years is key to getting it right in the next 10 years.
Rob, one last question. So as investors come into this kind of fund, how do the investors look at cash flows? You mentioned the three things, right? The number 3 was cash flows.
Where we want the fund to be when we get to $1 billion is more infrastructure-like, more annuity-like, maybe 70, 80%, just a stream of annual cash flows with off-takers that looks like a property fund.
Yeah.
The reality is in the beginning, it will be a lot more lumpy. It will be a mixture of carbon credits. It will be a mixture of what we have this framework in the UK called biodiversity net gain. So anyone doing a property development has to either on-site do it, or if they can't do it on-site, they have to buy a unit. It's a bit like a mitigation bank in the US. Look, the first 150 million, the cash flow profile will be more lumpy and we'll be managing to the IRR. I actually think the IRR will be higher. Already some of the deals that we're looking at are higher than the one we're doing, but the lumpiness of the cash flows. But the plan is as we do this, effectively we're building a brand new market, but where we want to get to is a more annuity-like stream. But that's really more when we get to $1 billion. The first fund will be a bit more lumpy.
Yeah, I think the beauty in all these businesses is that you're thinking maybe you have a few things at this point, but because you're in ecosystem services, like you say, you just don't, the optionality is just so huge. And it's hard to put a value on that.
Yeah, that's how the UK pension funds are seeing it, is they see it as a portfolio resilience against these kind of big systemic risks and value that optionality.
Looks like it's such a fantastic idea, and wishing you all the best. Thank you so much for sharing all this and the opportunity as well for the YPers.